Back to my guests, Bob Lazar and Gene Huff. And gentlemen, I have a surprise for you. Bob, you were, in effect, recruited, I think, by Edward Teller.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's listening to the show this morning as we speak, believe it or not, all the way down in Perth, Australia. His name is Stan Dale, and he was also recruited by Edward Teller. And he's got a question or two for you. I'm going to see if we can bring him up. All the way from Perth, Australia, there's a slight delay in the phone line transmission. Stan, are you there?
Yeah, Art.
Okay, very good. Bob Lazar is on the line, and I know you followed the Lazar story, and you might briefly, just very briefly, recap yours and ask a question.
All right, very briefly, I was working in the computer business in Dallas in I think it was 71. And among other things, I was also doing some investigation for the FBI at the corporations where I was working as an undercover kind of plant. Mm-hmm. During this time at this company where I was working, it was a large corporation. It was called Valtex Optical at the time. It had 100 sub-corporations, and a lot of them operated in Nevada. And during the time I was there, I was approached by one of the senior executives of this company to go meet with a Dr. James R. Maxfield at the Radiation Research Clinic over a couple miles from where we had the office in Dallas. And I didn't go for about a month, and then I met this same executive at a morning coffee in the executive tea room. And he said to me I hadn't been to see his friend Maxfield, and the reason he'd asked me to go was because I had talked to him about some work that I'd been doing in my time off, my private time at home, in my own laboratory, working with two things. One was a thermionic electrical converter, and the other was a rather novel method, I thought, of propelling a flying aircraft, which was circular-shaped and, flying saucer, you would call them today. Mm-hmm. Anyway, in the course of having told this guy just over coffee, well, he kind of got reasonably interested in it and told me I ought to go talk to a friend of his, and didn't do it. So 30 days passed, and he says to me, look, you haven't been to see Jim Maxwell yet. Please go this afternoon. I'll book you an appointment at 3. So I go over this place, and it's not like a place that sees people very often. It was open. The door was kind of ajar, but there was no cars in front of it and daylight. And I walked in. The lights were off down the hallway, and I walked down the hallway, and it was kind of dark, and suddenly this nurse, I guess a receptionist type lady, appears out of nowhere from the side and says, yes, can I help you? I said, oh, gee, I didn't know anybody was here. Look, I think I've got the right building. I'm looking for this Dr. James R. Maxfield. And she said, oh, yes, Dr. Maxfield is here. He'll be out in just a second. He's down the lab. And so, sure enough, within a minute or so, this big, tall dude comes out in a white medical coat, smoking a cigar and wearing cowboy boots. He says, yes, I've been expecting you. Come on into my office. And at this time is when I first got introduced to this clandestine organization in the United States that was headed by Dr. Edward Teller, and who Maxfield worked with Teller. And this organization had been working since the mid-'50s on something like 50-some-odd projects, all related directly to flying saucer technology, if you wish to put it down to that level. I was just the latecomer on the scene. They showed me about their base down at the South Pole and the ice cap, how you had to access it by submarine or something similar. And they explained to me they knew what I was doing. They even knew what I was thinking, virtually, because they asked me about my physics, and I said, well, look, thinking I was talking to some of the greatest physicists in the world, which I was. I didn't have my degree in that area, and, I said, well, look, guys, sir, I've been working on a way to unify gravitational, electromagnetic, and magnetic effects. And he said, oh, look, spare me all that. He said, you're working on anti-gravity, and let's get to the meat of the matter. How are you doing it? And that's when when he started telling me that I need to finish my research with them down in Australia instead of America. And that's why I'm here today, is because those guys packed me up and sent me down here. We parted ways in 1972 or 3, I think it was. I was only with them for about a year. And I got rather disenchanted with all the technology they were holding back from the people. I still was young enough to think that we could save the world by giving technology to countries that needed food and grain and water and stuff shipped back and forth rather rapidly. But anyway, because of that, we parted ways in a real huff, and I kind of hid in the bush for a while because they really kind of thought it'd be better if I was buried. And then after coming out of that, I wrote the book, The Cosmic Conspiracy, to kind of be insurance, and told a lot of what I had gone through in there and left the rest for, I'll tell the rest if you get short with me. So now that's my side, Bob.
That's a
did you ever run into
story.
Did you ever run into Jim Maxwell at all on your side of it?
No, I haven't. Actually, now I've got 1,000 questions now, but one of the a prominent one on my mind here is what was Teller's function?
He seemed to be in charge or overseer of all the projects at the highest level. That's all that I was told.
See, this is something I've always wondered about the project down where I worked, and no one really ever spoke of him, but I got just a gut feeling that he was silently in charge of everything. And what you're saying is also very interesting, because a lot of what you're talking about seems to mimic some of the things we were working on.
In fact, Bob, if I remember right, when Teller called you, when you originally got the call from him to contact the gentleman at EG&G, Teller said that he was no longer active but worked in a chief consultant capacity.
That's right.
Uh-huh. Something happened after I left because, in fact, I'll tell you, I had minders appointed down here who really run this country and run the prime ministers. My minders operate out of a group called the Melbourne Club, and they're, the old kind of British Raj, cigars and port, white-haired guys. Anyway, they brought me into their halls of power, and I had lunch a few times with the kingpins there, and my mentor was Sir John Williams and Henry Somerset, Sir Henry Somerset. Anyway, we were sitting there one day at lunch, and they were talking amongst themselves about someone moving in on them, or they were like an undeclared war status, and that they were losing. And they never mentioned aliens or all that kind of stuff, so don't jump the gun. But I heard them say, well, yeah, Henry, it looks like we're going to lose this. They're just moving in. And I waited, and nothing else was said. And I said, well, excuse me, gentlemen. I said, by they, thinking I'd be clever, I said, do you mean the European Economic Community? Because we've been talking, large corporate or money deals in the country. And they both looked at me like I'd, done a root at the table or something, and said, maybe we'll do some fishing up the farm this weekend, Henry. Yes, John. And, immediately I knew that I asked a question that I should have known the answer to already and didn't.